I want to take you back to a moment in your life that you didn't choose. Maybe it was the day you got laid off. Maybe it was the breakup you didn't see coming. Maybe it was when someone you trusted let you down. We've all been there. A moment we didn't ask for, a moment that broke something inside us. Now pause and think, what did you do next? Because that's the moment that defines everything. Not the moment of crisis, but the moment after. That split second where we either take ownership or we don't. You see, life is messy. It's unpredictable. It doesn't ask your permission before throwing change at you. That's not just how life is. That's how it's supposed to be. The real question isn't whether you'll face difficulty. The real question is, what story do you choose to write with what you've been handed? There's a mindset that changes lives instantly, not in theory, not eventually, but the moment you choose to adopt it. It's the mindset of ownership over circumstance. Let me explain what that really means. We've been raised in systems that reward us for staying in line. We're told that if we do the right things, life will reward us back. Get the degree, get the job, get the approval. But life doesn't play by the rules we imagine. And when things go wrong, our first instinct is to point outward. It's my boss. It's the economy. It's my upbringing. It's bad luck. And look, those things matter. Your environment influences you. But it doesn't define you. What separates the fulfilled from the frustrated isn't what they've gone through, it's what they do with what they've gone through. It's not about denial, it's about direction. You can acknowledge pain and still choose power. Ownership says, this happened, I didn't choose it, but now it's mine to deal with. That changes everything. Because when you take ownership, you stop being the victim of your story and you become the author of it. Let me tell you about a man I met once at a workshop. Let's call him Carlos. Carlos had been through hell. Childhood trauma, financial collapse, addiction, and loss. When he stood up to speak, you could feel the weight he carried. But his voice didn't shake. His hands didn't tremble. He spoke with a strange kind of peace. And he said something I'll never forget. I spent 20 years waiting for someone to save me. Then one day I realized I was the only one coming. That was the day everything changed for him. You see, ownership is not a concept. It's a decision. A decision to respond instead of react. To lead your life instead of just living it. To stop waiting for life to get easier and start deciding that you will get stronger. It doesn't mean you're to blame for everything that happens. It means you're responsible for how you rise from it. There's a quiet kind of power in that, because when you stop assigning blame, you start reclaiming energy. And energy is the fuel of transformation. Think about it. How much time have we all wasted ruminating on the why something happened instead of focusing on what now? Ownership is the shift from explanation to execution. It says, yes, that was unfair. Yes, I wish it was different, but I'm not waiting anymore. I'm building. I'm choosing. I'm moving forward. It's uncomfortable, yes, because once you accept that you're in charge of your life, you no longer have excuses. But that's also where your freedom begins. When you take ownership, you start showing up differently in relationships. You stop expecting others to complete you and start meeting them from a place of wholeness. You start setting boundaries. You start leading with integrity, not insecurity. In your career, ownership makes you proactive instead of reactive. You stop waiting for direction and start creating impact. Leaders are not those who have the most power, they're the ones who take the most responsibility. Even in your health, your mindset shifts. It's no longer about discipline forced from outside. It becomes a matter of internal alignment. This is my body, my mind, my energy. I will care for it, not because I have to, but because I choose to. That's the kind of mindset that moves mountains. But let me be clear. Ownership is not a one-time choice. It's not a motivational burst. It's a daily decision. Every morning, you get to decide, will I hand over my power to my circumstances or will I reclaim it? And every day you choose ownership, you strengthen your identity. You begin to see yourself not as someone life happens to, but as someone who shapes life, even in the storm. We don't become powerful when we win. We become powerful when we refuse to give up in the face of things we can't control. That is what builds character. That is what builds peace. That is what builds a meaningful life. So the next time something goes wrong, and it will, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what would it look like to take full ownership of this moment? Then do it. Act. Lead. Take the first step. Because the truth is, your life doesn't change when the world gets easier. It changes the moment you decide that the world doesn't get to dictate who you are. That mindset of radical ownership can shift everything instantly. And when you carry it with you, through success and struggle alike, you stop chasing power and start living with it. And that changes everything. We live in a world obsessed with results. It's everywhere. Likes, followers, titles, salaries, scores, promotions, outcomes. From the time we're children, we're taught to chase the finish line. Win the trophy, they said. Get the grade. Then later it becomes get the house, get the car, get the position. And somewhere along the way, we start defining our worth by how far ahead we are or how far behind. But the truth is, this obsession with the outcome is exhausting, and worse, it's hollow. Because no matter how much we achieve, the feeling of not enough comes back. It always does. The goalpost moves. You reach the summit only to find another one in the distance. But there's another way to live. A mindset that doesn't wait until the end to feel proud. A mindset that doesn't depend on applause or recognition to feel valuable. It's a mindset that flips the entire script. Fall in love with the process. I remember meeting a young athlete, maybe 22. He was disciplined, focused, incredibly talented, but something was off. He was burnt out, not because he didn't love the sport, but because he felt like every game, every play, every move was a test, a pass or fail. He was chasing perfection, chasing numbers. And when I asked him what first made him fall in love with the game, he paused, and then he smiled. The training, he said. I used to love the training. The smell of the gym, the sound of my shoes on the floor, the rhythm of getting better. And that was the moment. The process. That's what he had lost. And that's what he needed to return to. You see, when we measure our value by the outcome, we become transactional with our lives. We start showing up only when there's a prize at the end. Because not every effort gets rewarded in the short term. Not every good decision leads to immediate validation. But it always contributes to who we're becoming. The process is where the transformation happens. The process is where the identity gets built. Outcomes are snapshots. The process is the story. I once read a story about a violinist who practiced alone in a basement for 10 years, not for fame, not for an audience, but because the practice itself made her feel alive. The outcome wasn't guaranteed, but the process, those hours of focus and flow, that's what shaped her. We need to stop asking, what will I get if I do this? And start asking, who will I become if I keep doing this? It's a different question. And it leads to a different life. When you fall in love with the process, you're no longer fragile. You don't break down every time progress is slow. You don't quit just because recognition is delayed. Because you're not working for a moment, you're working for meaning. Think about the people who consistently grow, who build, who improve, who become leaders worth following. They have something in common. They've learned to find joy in the effort itself. The result is a bonus. But the work, the journey, that's where they come alive. And yes, it's countercultural. because culture says, don't waste time unless it guarantees success. But that mindset kills passion. It kills curiosity. It kills mastery. Some of the most meaningful achievements in life take years before they bloom. And if we're only obsessed with the fruit, we'll never commit to planting seeds. There's something sacred in waking up each day and deciding to show up, even when no one is clapping. There's something noble in practicing when no one is watching. There's a quiet strength in devotion, doing the right thing, not because it's easy or fast, but because it's right. We all admire those who stay the course, the ones who push through when it gets boring, when it gets hard, when the reward isn't obvious. But here's the truth. They aren't superhuman. They've simply chosen to fall in love with the work. And that mindset protects them from discouragement, because their sense of purpose isn't tied to outcome, it's tied to effort. In relationships, the same principle holds. It's easy to get caught up in expectations. What do I get out of this? But the real beauty is in choosing to be present, to serve, to grow together, not because you're owed something, but because it's worth building. Love, like mastery, lives in the daily practice. In business too, the process matters more than the promise. You don't build trust overnight. You don't build impact in one move. The businesses that last are the ones that commit to integrity in every decision, even when the numbers aren't immediate. They know something others forget. Process compounds. Devotion to process builds character. It creates emotional resilience. It teaches patience, humility, consistency, and grit. Those are the qualities that change lives, not overnight success. I get it. Results matter. They do. But they're only part of the picture. The bigger part is who you become in pursuit of them. Because the truth is, most people don't fail because they're not talented. They fail because they didn't commit long enough to the process that would have unlocked that talent. When you shift your mindset from outcome to process, your entire relationship with growth changes. You start seeing every setback as a lesson, not a loss. You start seeing each day not as a test, but as a training ground. You start to trust the slow burn. And over time, something magical happens. The results start to come not because you chased them. So the next time you catch yourself asking, what's the point if it's not working yet? Remind yourself, this moment is the point. This repetition, this effort, this focus. That's where greatness is born. If you want a mindset that will change your life immediately, choose this one. Stop chasing the trophy. Start honoring the training. Don't measure your day by what you achieved. Measure it by how fully you showed up to the process. That's where the change begins. Not someday, not later, now. There's a pattern I've noticed over the years, one that shows up in athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, students, leaders. It's this subtle, dangerous waiting game. They tell themselves, one day I'll be confident. One day I'll feel like I'm ready. One day I'll step into who I'm meant to be. But here's the hard truth. There is no one day. There's only now. The people we admire most aren't waiting for a moment of transformation. They're acting from it before it even arrives. Most people are stuck in a loop. They believe they need to achieve something before they can become something. Once I lose weight, I'll feel healthy. Once I get the promotion, I'll feel like a leader. Once I launch the business, I'll be an entrepreneur. But that mindset traps you. Because you're always reaching, never becoming. The mindset that changes everything immediately is the opposite. Instead of chasing the outcome, you adopt the identity. You don't wait to feel like the person you want to be. You decide to become that person now. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I met a man who'd just run his first marathon. He wasn't a professional athlete. He wasn't even particularly fit when he started. He was an accountant, a father, a regular guy. But when I asked him what the hardest part was, he didn't talk about race day. He didn't talk about the long runs or the blisters. He said the hardest part was convincing himself that he was a runner before he'd ever run a mile. And I didn't believe I was that kind of person, he said. I kept saying, I'll call myself a runner when I run a half marathon. Then it became, once I run a full one. But the shift happened when I woke up one day, put on my shoes, and said out loud, I'm a runner. That's the day everything changed. He became the identity before he had the outcome. And it worked. Not because he tricked himself, but because identity shapes behavior. Once he saw himself differently, he started showing up differently. That's what most people don't realize. We think action creates identity, but identity also creates action. It's a loop, and it works in both directions. If you want to write a book, don't wait until you get published to call yourself a writer. Start writing. Start thinking like a writer. Start structuring your day like one. Wake up early and protect your creative time like your life depends on it. Because in a way it does. That identity shift will drive the habits that eventually create the outcome. This is the reason people struggle with consistency. They try to change what they do without changing who they believe they are. They say, I'm trying to get fit, instead of I'm someone who values health. They say, I'm trying to wake up early, instead of I'm the kind of person who starts their day with intention. Language matters. Self-talk matters. Because every time you declare something about yourself, your actions begin to align with that belief. I once worked with a leader who was struggling with confidence. He'd just been promoted, and despite his title, he felt like an imposter. He kept saying, I don't feel like a real leader. And so he acted cautiously. He second-guessed himself. He avoided tough conversations. But here's what we did. We didn't try to fix his leadership skills. We worked on his identity. We had him write a letter to himself. Not from the version who felt unsure, but from the version who had grown into that leadership role. The version who had already become the kind of leader others trusted and followed. He read that letter every morning. And slowly, something shifted. He didn't wait for permission to lead. He started leading. And people noticed. Identity isn't about pretending. It's about aligning with who you're choosing to become. You don't become successful and then feel worthy. You decide you are worthy. And that identity fuels the actions that lead to success. This mindset shift is immediate. You don't need to wait until the world sees you differently. You need to see yourself differently. And yes, this requires courage. Because when you step into a new identity, the world might not catch up right away. People might still see the old version of you. They might question your change. That's okay, because you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for who you're becoming. This mindset is about integrity, not in the moral sense, but in the structural sense. Wholeness, alignment. When your thoughts, words, and actions